Welcome to Share, a podcast production of Amethyst Recovery Centers. I'm your host, Kabir Singh. At the top of each episode, we'd like to remind anyone listening that addiction is treatable and recovery is possible. To get in touch, call 888-81-SOBER or visit amethystrecoverycenters.com today. For most of us in recovery, we know that getting sober does not mean that fun is over. We're a bunch of jokes and laughs, and that's a lot. And that's the topic of our show today, using humor in recovery. And who better to discuss this with us than a stand-up comedian himself, Mike Moran. Mike has been in stand-up for
10 years about.
10 years. And he uses his platform to spread awareness and support recovery from substance abuse and mental health disorders. He is the co-host of the Confessional podcast, and we're glad to be speaking with Mike via Zoom today. So welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. And so this is a totally new thing for us. We're doing this via Zoom. So we appreciate you making this accommodation in this time and doing something which is a first for us. So, just kind of going to jump into stuff. Of course, as I mentioned here to the listeners, that, Mike is a stand-up comedian. I mentioned as well, he's a person in recovery, much like myself. And so that often means there was a before and an after. The after was where we are now. So, Mike, tell us a little bit how you got into comedy, maybe, how it was before when you got sober, and, we'll talk a little bit about that.
All right. Well, I've never done comedy inebriated. I actually got into it in recovery and pretty well into recovery, probably 7-8 years. I was one of those people that, when I got sober at 21, and I kind of thought like, well, now at least I can try all the things that I've been talking about trying that I never have accomplished, like doing comedy or doing music or whatever. And then 6 or 7 years passed by and I still haven't done those things. And I kind of like hit a bottom in sobriety and realized I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to do on the outside, which are good, like being a decent person and earning my living and going back to school and doing all that stuff. But there was just a part of me that was really like, I'm not super happy myself, even though I'm more happy than I thought I would be. I need to be really loving my life, or at least going for it. And so that's how I got into this stuff. I was, really, I was this close to kind of like resigning myself to a life of, working a job that I wasn't into, and, marrying someone that I probably shouldn't have, again, like looked right on the outside, but I knew something was wrong on the inside. And I basically like quit everything. I quit school. Girlfriend left me eventually, and I said, I'm going to become a starving artist. And that's what I've done. And it's worked out pretty well, surprisingly. Not if you look at it on paper, probably, but for me, spiritually, it's been just amazing.
That's awesome. I think like for many of us, and it can be widely agreed that what often brings, it's certainly myself and brought myself into recovery was a spiritual bottom, and it's not always attached to the same things that maybe normal society measures out there, and sort of some of the things that brings us to our knees, if you will, to seek out recovery and end up in a treatment center or receive services that way. Much afterwards, when the dust settles and the mind heals a little bit, we look for a deeper meaning in life, and that's really cool that you've been able to find it through comedy and the starving artist avenue, as you described. How has it certainly changed for you over time? I mean, did you just did you just go to a stand-up night and put your toe?
No, I took an improv class, and shockingly, people thought I was pretty good at it, and that's weird because I'm never good at anything right away, and rarely good at anything over time. I mean, that is one of the things I've learned in recovery is I can become good at anything if I put in the time and the work and I keep doing it and keep trying. But this one, for the first time in, probably my life, I was like okay at it immediately, and people were telling me that. So I thought, okay, maybe this is where I need to pursue, but the next thing in my life. I and from there, that kind of, there's a little bit of crossover between improv and stand up. So I tried stand up for the first time, and that went shockingly well. Which again, I'm just not used to. And so at that point I said, this is clearly something I need to be doing, that I'm supposed to be doing. Apparently I'm not terrible at it. And so why not, give it a shot? And it's, I'm still just shocked that I'm allowed to do it. I can't believe, like, you know what I mean? Like, people will say, like, are you upset that you're not making a living off of it, or you're not, do you want to get somewhere with it or go for, and I'm just like, I can't believe that I get invited to do it sometimes. This wasn't like part of the plan. So I'm just psyched about that.
Yeah, we'll never really always understand, especially as those of us in recovery. I know we often do tell others in early recovery, it describe to me what your life would look like in 5 years, and it's likely you'll sell yourself very, very short of
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
it'll look
I
like.
mean, it is really, like, if in an ego way, I have not accomplished all that much as far as like money and success, and on paper, the powerful stuff, the stuff that looks cool, I do not have. But if I concentrate on, what my heart wants, and take a humble look at things, it's like, oh my God, this life is pretty awesome.
I mean, it's pretty safe to say, well, what I'm sort of gaining a sense of here is you're happier than you were before, maybe confining yourself to the normal, social mores and what stuff's supposed to look like, especially in these metropolitan areas, right outside of DC and Baltimore and like, and
Absolutely. Absolutely.
every other stoplight has $100,000 car at it.
Right. And it gets a little scarier as I get older, but I don't have a choice. This is what I have to do in life to be happy. And I know that if I keep it humble and just try to not hurt anyone else, that things will be fine.
Yeah. See, but pretty much covered. I was thinking in my head, how has comedy helped you? And you pretty much well covered that. A lot of comedians use. I've watched stand up, Netflix, and most recently watched, Dave Chappelle's stand up on Netflix, and it was just funny and self-deprecating sort of humor and things like that. What does your humor look like? Do you talk? Are these audiences at recovery venues? Are they mixed? Do you talk about?
No.
Okay.
I'm really not like a recovery comedian per se. I some of my bits, number one, I really don't talk about my actual self too much in stand up. I have other avenues to do that, the podcast and my writing and things like that. It's more of a surreal look at myself and a look at life, so it's not literal. But I do have plenty of recovery bits and alcoholic bits, and within the world of mental health. And so when I get asked to do a recovery show, I have enough in that area that I can do it. But I'm really not I don't specialize in one thing at all. It's more just, I just kind of write whatever I feel like writing. And it tends to, it comes back to those issues a lot. But, I definitely I don't have like a genre or a niche. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's been part of, following my heart, or like, I would probably be more successful if I did kind of pick a niche or try, or like a brand, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
that's just
Probably.
not what I want to do. My heart tells me to just kind of do what I do.
Yeah. I guess that's important, especially as an artist, to follow your sort of inner spirit, inner guide there, the compass, if you will, to see what you.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that you've used some of your comedy platforms to host events and kind of raise support and awareness, maybe surrounding substance abuse, mental health disorders. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I'm always up for donating my time for anyone else's show. I get asked to do like mental health shows or alcoholic show, recovery shows or whatever. And I'm definitely always up for that. And I started a series of fundraiser shows called For the Love of. And those are all volunteer shows. Comedians all over DC and Baltimore volunteer their time. And that's for a variety of, we do a different charitable cause each time. But like I said, because of my life, it tends to go back to like mental health stuff or recovery stuff a lot of the time. This next one coming up is going to be for I forget what they're called, but it's some mental health group. And so yeah, I just I do those, and now in the pandemic we've been doing them virtually, and it's another one of those things where it's like every time I try to sell out, it fails. Like every time I try to do something that I think's like, oh, this is going to make me famous or make me money, it doesn't work out. But if apparently where I need to be is doing charity shows, because those always end up being successful. So it's like, all right, I guess that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fulfilling in its own right. You're
Absolutely.
meeting new people and exploring different options there.
Absolutely.
Those particular, you mentioned COVID, of course, this pandemic that's been going on and has continued to go on. These events that you're attending or donating your time to and the like, these are widely virtual events and being held via some virtual platform, perhaps Zoom, like we're on now.
For now, yeah, they're actually held over a service called Bonfire, which is actually a really good service. They charge a flat rate of $5 per ticket, all of which goes to the performers, or in our case, the charity. Right. And they make money off of a 15% service charge. And also you can tip the performers. So that's actually part of what we've been doing too, is when we do a charity show, we'll have a tip jar for the performers so that everybody gets, like a few bucks just to get home or whatever. If someone travels up from DC, pay them their gas money. But yeah,
we don't want you starving. So
yeah, it's,
if you're listening out there, folks, and you're in one of Mike's stand-up, hit the tip jar.
What I found is that I have so many good people in my life now that no matter how pathetic my bank account gets, I somehow remain okay.
The the podcast that you mentioned, it's called The Confessional.
Yes, Confessional Podcast.
The Confessional Podcast. Well, can you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Well, basically, it started because I was, for some reason, people open up to me, for better or worse. Like when I was an Uber driver, people would like be telling me their darkest secrets and like really like go into town with, I remember having like a lot of really personal, emotional experiences just being an Uber driver. And online, I just started asking questions, just kind of asking questions about life, mostly because I'm kind of a horror guy and I like weird stuff like that. It's more in the vein of unsolved mysteries and things. And it started like becoming its own thing, where people were commenting every day, and it just became like a big thing where everyone was interacting. And so I decided to make a podcast out of it. And I put it on hold because I actually did the radio for a little while. Didn't last super long with that. But I went back to doing the confessional, and basically with people's permission, we read their experiences and we interview, whoever. And we like to give, artists a chance to talk about something that they don't normally talk about. And we've had Michael Ian Black, we've had a few Ramones, we've had Matt Pinfield from MTV, Brad Sherwood from Whose Line Is It Anyway, Joanna Angel, and a few other big ones. And it's just, I love doing it.
And so that happens. How frequently does that take place for you?
It was every week. The pandemic kind of screwed that up, but we're slowly getting back to every week.
Cool. No, that sounds exciting. I'm going to make sure to tune into that.
Thank you.
A lot of us, when we're new in recovery, one of the things that we like to do at these, Amethyst recovery centers, the podcasts are sort of, if somebody out there is new and they're listening and they're discovering about themselves, a lot of the gifts that perhaps you and I are sitting here on this podcast and have received. You talked about sort of getting into comedy and not taking the normal route of reassembling life. Interesting, because certainly you're the guest here, but I can relate to a lot that you said. I didn't assemble my life in a normal type of way. For a little bit more of an altruistic route, but that's not always the case for everyone. You know, as people discover things about themselves. Could you tell us something that they could discover, and perhaps if they're interested in doing stand-up, maybe what could be the benefits of doing that? Just somebody that's interested in perhaps taking your route. It's just so unique that I don't think I'll have a lot. I can get lots of people on here to talk about recovery. There's lots of people in recovery. There's not a lot of people that are in stand-up and in recovery.
Right. Well, I would say, you know, if you're interested in it, then just start hitting open mics, you know, almost a 90 meetings in 90 day type of thing. Just start going to open mics and don't, you know, just see where it goes. And definitely, you know, don't let anyone, there is a lot of negativity that can be a dark, culture in a lot of ways, you know. It's obviously it's also, you have to look at how strong your sobriety is, because you are going to be around alcohol a lot in bars. So, you know, definitely make sure you're fit in that way first. Improv is actually a little bit, I recommend that more for people newer in recovery, because that's a little less, you know, based around alcohol and bars and whatnot. But I would say just dive into it and don't really take anyone's advice too seriously, you know, because you're going to be hearing all sorts of things that may or may not apply to you, or may not be true. And there is a lot of, you know, we're some pretty messed up people in stand up in a lot of ways. So it's like, you know, make sure you're doing it for yourself, find what you love and just go for it. You don't have to be anyone's idea of a stand-up comedian. There's going to be people telling you you're not a real stand-up comedian if you don't do X, Y, Z. You know, just jump in and find out what you love about it and just go for that.
It sounds a lot like recovery itself, and perhaps what my sponsor certainly told me in early recovery is certainly, you know, protect your recovery. You know, not all information is good information. Some of it you need to leave on the shelf, and others of it you can take. So
right,
a lot of the same tenets: protecting my recovery, protecting, you know, the listener out there. If it's something you give a shot, to listen to Mike and understand that some of these environments are, you know, risky environments for us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like that. And so did you ever encounter a particular situation where you were really at that fork in the road, making a decision? Was there anything that stands out in your mind that
what do you mean?
Meaning like, were, you know, offered a beverage, or I don't know, there's
no, not really, because I had, you know, like I said, I'd been sober 7 or 8 years at that point, and I had worked in restaurants too, you know, so I'd been around alcohol. It was, you know, and it's different for everyone. For me, you know, the temptation of alcohol was never so much physical, you know, it wasn't so much the smell or the look or the you know, the beer pouring from the tap that was triggering for me. You know, it was always more of a psychological thing. Probably partially due to the fact that I never really got to enjoy the nightlife, you know, like I got sober at 21. So I didn't really associate bars and socialization with alcohol necessarily. So that was never really a big problem. I will tell you though, one of the few times I accidentally drank alcohol was at a show when I, also like in recovery, I thought it was a good idea to consume massive amounts of caffeine all the time. And I was about to go on. I didn't realize I was about to go on. And they said, "Mike, you're up next." And I said, "Oh, I better consume the rest of my iced coffee here that I had at the table." And I grabbed a whiskey of some kind, and I think I swallowed a little bit of it. I got most of it out, but it was one of those things where it's like, oh my God, I have to like go on stage after this, like immediately after this. But it was fine, you know. Those things happen.
The intent wasn't there, and I don't want to insinuate that we get a pass in those particular things, but yeah, I know if I went through something like that, I probably need to call somebody in my support network pretty quickly. So yeah, good for you. It looks like
Right. Yeah. I wanted to, but I had to literally get on stage.
yeah.
And I'm sitting the whole time I'm on stage, I'm thinking to myself, like, am I feeling it? Oh my, is this a buzz? Like but I don't think I actually felt anything.
Yeah. Well, Mike, congratulations. Because
Thank you.
it's not common and always the fact that everyone gets sober at such a young age. You're an inspiration to a lot of our younger listeners out there that, I happen to get clean sober at 34. So at a longer sort of runway using, and that's not what really matters. It's what matters is what brings us in. So, and for finding something that is meaningful for you, I'm looking forward to maybe when this pandemic lifts and they'll be able to come out and support you at one of your shows.
Awesome.
And your tip jar and the like, and bring a group.
Awesome. If venues still exist at that point.
Yeah, it's all quite up in the air right now. So there you have it, folks. A glimpse into the life of the sober stand-up comedian. We hope this conversation has allowed many of you to dispel the myth that sobriety is boring, or that without substances you can't be funny or creative. For Mike and many others, the exact opposite has proven to be true. A life in recovery is the very beginning of the most creative and adventurous periods of our lives. If you or a loved one needs help with substance abuse or co-occurring mental health disorders, Amethyst Recovery Centers is here for you. Visit amethystrecoverycenters.com or call 188-81-SOBER today to learn about a facility which has the right level of care for you. I'm Kabir Singh. This has been another episode of Share. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you again next time.